Could you not only survive, but thrive on just $10 a week for groceries? Yeah! If you stumbled upon this channel, I'm Sarah, and on this channel, I like to show how to save money and also eat well by making all of your own food and by shopping smarter at places like Winco. And I have done some experiments in the past where I have lived off of just, $30 a week for groceries, $40 a week for groceries, $23 a week for groceries, $20 a week for groceries. But this month, for 4 weeks, I am doing 4 weeks for $40, which means roughly $10 per week for groceries. I have parts 1 and 2. This is week number 3, so weeks 1 and 2 are in my playlist below in the video description. You can also find my grocery haul where I went to Winco to spend just under $40 to get all of the ingredients that you're going to see in all of these dishes. So check out those videos if you haven't already. And this week, week number 3, we are finally breaking out that bag of potatoes and we're going to make some hash browns with eggs for breakfast. We're going to make some bean chili for lunch with some cornbread on the side. And then for dinner, we're going to be making some pasta with a spinach pesto. And I'm going to show you how I made all that right now. And we are into week 3 now of the $40 month. And starting with breakfast, I've got my giant bag, my 10-pound bag of roasted potatoes, eggs, and oil, and that's it. So my breakfast, in case you haven't figured it out already, it's going to be just really basic fried eggs and hash browns. So I counted these potatoes in advance to see how many there were so I could make sure all my recipes work out. I'm aiming for 300 calories a potato, which is 2 potatoes, and there's 26 potatoes total in this entire bag. So for this entire week, I'm going to be using 14 potatoes out of the 26, so a little more than half of this entire 10-pound bag of russet potatoes. And each serving, like I said, it's going to be 2 potatoes, 2 eggs, and 2 tablespoons of oil, so 2, 2, 2, really easy. So I gave these potatoes a really good scrub, and as you can see, I chose like 1 large potato and 1 small potato, just balance each other out so that total they'll be about 300 calories. And then I forgot to take this out earlier, but I have some pepper, and look at all the salt I still have. I think I got more than enough salt for the whole month, so hey, I can give myself like a 15-cent refund at the end of the month. Anyway, I'm going to grate these potatoes on this lovely humble box grater. So this is our 2 medium-sized potatoes, aka 300 calories of potatoes, all grated. And you need to squeeze the water out of it so that it will actually brown. So this is an old tank top that I've cut up. You can, of course, buy cheesecloth and use cheesecloth, or you can just have your own free reusable cheesecloth by sacrificing an old holy tank top of yours. Anyway, you just want to fold this over, and we're going to squeeze this over the sink. So this is after it has been squeezed out. You probably can't see it very well on the camera, but a lot of water came out, and it's a lot drier right now, so it will cook up nicely. I have my 2 tablespoons of oil heating up in the pan, and it's almost there. And when it's ready, I'm going to put the potatoes in. I don't know how well you can see it, but there are faint wisps of smoke coming off the oil. So we'll add our potatoes. It should sizzle. So I usually like to use like a lot of grease and cook mine flat, but what you're kind of supposed to do is keep them separate, keep them moving, and not get them so oily or greasy. And we are going to need some oil left over at the end to fry our eggs. So, yeah. I mean, I guess I could have done more hard-boiled eggs and then used more grease in my hash browns, which would have been nice for me. But I wanted a little variety. I already did hard-boiled eggs. Anyway, I need to season this. Look at how much salt I still have. The pepper's dwindling a little bit, though. Put the pepper in, now some salt. These guys can take a lot of salt, actually. In there. For these kind of hash browns, the kind that I'm making that are looser and not like super crispy, a nonstick skillet is your best bet. Otherwise, I'd use cast iron. So take a moment to appreciate all the steam that is escaping these hash browns. Really important to have the pan on very high heat, otherwise instead of hash browns you get hash steams. All that steam would have stayed in. There we are, we're getting a little color. Okay, this is where if I were cooking this for myself, I would just cook the eggs in the pan with the hash browns, but since I'm doing this for a video and I want a nicer looking thumbnail, I'm going to remove the hash browns from the pan right now, and I am sad that there's like hardly any oil left. I probably should have reserved some of it, but that's okay. That's why I used a non-stick skillet. So it's going to chill out. It's not going to chill out. It's going to stay warm on my warm plate. And in here, I'm actually going to make sunny side up eggs. I usually don't do that, but since it's a dry pan, and I think I'd like the moisture in there, otherwise this dish could be too dry. So I'm just going to get a little salt and pepper on them. And cover them so they can kind of steam. Okay, the white is just set, and the yolks are still quite runny. Oh, this is the fun part, because we barely have any grease in this pan. Oh, so much for a pretty thumbnail. Oh, it's mostly staying together. Ah! Ah! There, we get the idea. And behold, it's basic breakfasty goodness. So what's there to say? It's just your basic eggs and hash browns. And yeah, lesson learned, use half of the oil, so 1 tablespoon of oil for the hash browns, which are tasty because they have 2 tablespoons of oil in my version, and save 1 tablespoon of oil for your egg. Which tastes good anyway, even though there was like barely any oil in the pan for it. Yeah, I used to eat this for breakfast all the time in high school. And for good reason. It's cheap, it's pretty easy, and it tastes pretty good. So we are on to our lunch for week 3, and this is the remainder of the beans, of the pinto beans. This is 3.5 cups of pinto beans that I have measured in there, and this remaining is 1 cup of pinto beans, and that's going to be used in week 4. So originally I thought that this was going to be 3 cups of beans, but I bought a little more than 4 cups total apparently, so yay, more calories, make up for the deficiencies in week 1 and 2. Anyway, I'm just going to soak these beans overnight because I'm going to make chili with them tomorrow. So welcome to lunch or dinner. I prefer to have big calorie lunches, and this is going to be a big calorie lunch. So this is lunch for week 3. I'm going to be making a bean chili with a cornbread on the side. So I have my 3.5 cups of pinto beans that have been soaking overnight. I'm just going to drain these to put them in. I'm going to use my other onion. I'm going to use 1 of my 2 cans of tomato sauce. I'm going to use some of this oil. It looks like about half of it has been used up. 1 egg in the cornbread. About 1/3 of this head of garlic. I need this for 3 dishes total throughout the month, so I'm finally using part of that head of garlic. This is the cup of milk that was left over from the gallon that I bought. That's going to go in the cornbread, as is some of this flour, all of this cornmeal, pinch of salt, which I still have so much. And these are the 3 tablespoons of sugar that I rescued from the big bag of sugar, because I'm going to put most of that in the cornbread, a little bit of it in the chili. And some pepper and all the cumin, or most of the cumin. I'm going to save a little bit for week 4. And then most of the chili powder. And again, I'm going to save a little bit for week 4. And some baking powder for my cornbread to rise. I think I got more than enough baking powder. I think I'm actually going to have a little bit of baking powder left over. And another item that is finally going to make its appearance is cheese. So I'm going to actually kind of start with the cheese. I'm going to portion it out because I need a certain number of calories for it for my chili and for 2 more recipes in week 4. And I just want to make sure I have exactly enough. So I have calculated that I need 1,100 calories of cheese for this chili for the whole week. So there is 110 calories per ounce, so that means I need exactly 10 ounces of this cheese. So let's see how many ounces total this is. Of course, it does like fractions of pounds, which is not base 10. So it's basically just ever so slightly over 1.5 pounds. A pound is 16 ounces, so half a pound is 8 ounces, so total 24 ounces. So that means I need 10/24ths of this block of cheese, or 5/12ths, and that's just a little bit less than half of it. And I honestly think I'm going to just kind of eyeball it. You really could get out a ruler if you want this to be exact, or a kitchen scale if you want it to be exact, but I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. So this would be like a half, so I'm just going to whoop. So this block will be my cheese for the chili throughout this week, and then the rest of this cheese is going to be saved for week 4. If you are concerned about your cheese going bad, cheese doesn't last necessarily that long, which is why I kept it shrink wrapped all this time. But if you're concerned about it going bad, you can pop this into the freezer until you're ready to use it, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. And then this remaining block of cheese for the 7 servings of chili, I'm going to cut that into 7 equal pieces, just for easier portioning throughout the week. I think I will actually get a ruler for this one. Okay, so this actually worked out really well. 3.5 inches long, so each serving is going to be ½ an inch. It doesn't have to be super, super perfect. I just want to make sure that I'm eating enough food every single day. Ta-da! I've taken off the root and stem end of the onion, and I'm going to add them to my container of frozen vegetable scraps that I've been collecting throughout the month. Almost full now, but I'm almost done using all of the aromatic vegetables. I'm going to turn this into a broth on week 4. So I'm just going to season with some salt and let the onions sweat for a while. So I've separated about 1/3 of this head of garlic. I'm going to save the rest of this for week 4. Actually, some of this is going to be used in week 3 as well, so 2 more dishes. And this I'm going to mince. Ooh, this head of garlic is the kind that has all these little tiny annoying to peel cloves of garlic in it, but I did it, and these little root bits that I cut off, they have little tiny bits of garlic in them, so I'm also going to freeze these along with my other stock scraps. So my onions have sweated nicely, they're translucent, so it's time to add garlic. Adding the garlic towards the end so it won't have much of a chance to burn. And we're about ready to start adding our other aromatics to this. I usually would add so many more things to my chili. I feel like a really basic bad cook here. But anyway, actually doing pretty well with black pepper, so I think I'll go generous on that black pepper to make up for the deficiency of other spices. But I got some cumin and some chili powder. I'm not going to use all of the cumin and chili powder because I need some of it for next week. And like a ½ teaspoon to a teaspoon of cumin for next week. And I went ahead and added about a tablespoon of black pepper because I still have plenty. I'm just going to stir these spices into the oil. Should get nice and fragrant. Again, ordinarily I'd put so many more spices in here, like sage and just different kind of chili powder, freshly ground chili powder. But what can you do? So once you've sauteed these spices in the oil for a couple minutes, add my mighty tomatoes. Usually I use diced tomatoes instead of sauce, but the sauce was a little bit cheaper. Add the soaked beans. Woo! Fills it up almost to the top. This is a lot of chili. Well, it's chili for a week, so it should be a lot of chili. And we're going to embrace our Italian grandma. You want enough water to cover the beans, and just gently simmer this for 2 to 3 hours or until the beans are tender. Alright, so now I am going to make cornbread to go with my chili. So I'm using about a cup of this flour, all of the cornmeal, which is a cup, all of this sugar that I've saved out, a pinch of the salt, and a tablespoon of the baking powder. So I was generous. I overestimated. It looks like I've got a whole tablespoon of baking powder just left over. And in here I have 1/3 cup of oil, and I'm going to add 1 egg. Stir it with a mighty fork. And I'm going to incorporate the rest of the milk from the gallon in there. Just going to incorporate these dry ingredients. Make sure there's no clumps of baking powder or flour in there. And then just going to pour the wet into the dry. And stir until combined. So I'm going to let this sit for a few minutes to let the cornmeal hydrate a little bit. It's going to get a little bit thicker as I wait. And then I'm also going to preheat my oven to 450. So I've poured the batter into this measuring cup just so I can see how much of it I have, and I have about 2 3/4 cups of it. I want to make 7 corn muffins. I like using a muffin tin because then it's really easy to portion everything out. I have very lightly greased these 7 muffin containers with part of that 1/3 cup of oil. And so 2 3/4 cups of batter divided by 7. That's a little less than 1/2 cup per muffin, and these muffin holders are about 1/2 cup each, so I'm going to mostly fill these up to the top. So I guess these were a little smaller than 1/2 cup because they're pretty much completely to the top. Ordinarily, I would probably make 9 muffins. This was meant to be made in an 8x8 pan, but I wanted to do 7 servings exactly. So now I'm going to bake these in a 425-degree oven for 8 to 10 minutes, probably more like 10 minutes since these are filled more full than they should be. So it wound up taking about 17 minutes because these muffins are really big. But they are done. So after about 2.5 hours, it's just about done. I'm just smushing some of the beans along the edge of the pot to give it a little bit of a variety of texture and to thicken up the sauce a little bit. And it'll be ready to serve. And behold, its chili, cheesy goodness. So usually, confession time, I like my chili with beef in it. I like it with a lot more spices in it, some brown sugar, some balsamic vinegar, and I like to top it with fresh cilantro, avocado, and cheese. And I like to eat it with Fritos instead of cornbread, although cornbread is a really nice accompaniment. Nice. But my husband turned me on to Fritos. I love that crispy contrast. But Fritos are expensive and not that healthy. And cilantro and avocado are expensive. So are more spices, so went with a simplified version of chili. It's still a million times better than what you get in a can, though. And it's really not that much effort. Most of it is hands-off. You're just letting it simmer in a pot or in a crock pot all day. And yeah, so good. And welcome to dinner of week 3. I'm going to be making spaghetti. So I thought I would go with a cheap version of pesto, and it's going to be a milder version of pesto as well because it uses spinach instead of basil, which in my view will probably make it less tasty. Also, we're using canola oil instead of olive oil, and there's going to be no Parmesan cheese, no pine nuts. This is in fact going to be vegan. The shushing sound in the background that you might be hearing is a pot of water that I'm bringing to a boil with some salt. I also have some more salt and pepper, another 1/3 of that entire head of garlic. And I'm going to be using 3,500 calories total of this spaghetti, so I'm going to be using about 70% of this package. I'm also going to be using this little guy to puree this. And I've got a little less than 1/2 cup of the vegetable oil. I want to go for 1 tablespoon of oil per serving. gonna add the oil in little by little. If this had a feeding tube, I would be streaming the oil in slowly while blending it, but it doesn't have a feeding tube. So I'm putting in a little at a time, blending between each addition. Don't know how well you can see this, but it has like thickened and gotten a lot of body to it from the emulsification of the oil. Not too shabby. Gonna season it with some salt and pepper. Might adjust the seasoning after I add it to the pasta, but for now. And there's our spinach pesto. So I saved out about 30% of the spaghetti and I left the other 70% in there to put in this dish. Okay, our water has started to boil, so let's put this pasta in. Preserve some pasta water. And that's just about al dente, so I'm going to drain that. And behold, it's pesto-y, pasta-y goodness. So I love pesto with pasta. I love real pesto with basil and pine nuts and parm. But this, I gotta say, it tastes really good. I can't tell you how good it feels to like eat something green and very fresh tasting like this. In a week where I'm not really eating fresh vegetables. This is just lovely. And yeah, if pesto is a little too intense for you, try spinach instead of basil because it's a lot milder. So there you have it, week 3 for $10. Reminder, it's not going to be exactly $10 for every single week because it is $40 for 4 weeks. So each week is maybe a little over or a little under $10, but it all averages out to just under $10. Also calories, I counted all the calories to make sure that a person could actually be full on this diet if they're on a 2,000 calorie diet. Other weeks I got a little bit under, the first 2 weeks I got a little tiny bit under 2,000 calories. This week I got a little over 2,000 calories per day. So as you can see, that all kind of evens out as well. If you're on a diet that's like less than 2,000 calories, by the way, a lot of these meals are easily freezable, so that's no problem. So now it is time for me to give my MVP award. Every week I've just kind of been assigning like what my favorite dish was that I made for the week. And this week, while I'm tempted to give it to the chili and the cornbread because ultimately I feel like that's the best meal of everything that I made. I do make chili with cornbread a lot. It's one of my go-to, like if I want to make a big batch of something that tastes good left over that my husband and I both like. I will of course put more ingredients in the chili. I'll put in way more spices. I'll put in beef as well as beans. And we like to have it with Fritos instead of with cornbread because we discovered that Fritos are amazing with chili. I like to have fresh cilantro, maybe some avocado with it, but those ingredients are really expensive. So this very basic stripped down version of it with beans, it was still quite good actually. I was pleasantly surprised, but not the way I would like to ordinarily have my chili. But anyway, that was my roundabout way of saying that this week's MVP meal was actually the pasta with the spinach pesto. And I think, really in hindsight, it wasn't that special. And leftover, it was definitely not as good as it was fresh. If you have the time and the means, like I made the whole batch, you know, just as is a whole batch to show you guys how you would make a whole batch of it, because I think that's what most people would want to do. They would want to make the whole batch in advance and then put it in Tupperware containers and eat it slowly throughout the week, so they only have to cook one day out of the week. But if you have the means, like make the sauce in advance and make the pasta fresh each time, because it tastes so much better when it's fresh. But even leftover, it's also pretty good. I guess the reason why it's my MVP is just in this meal plan, because I'm using so many non-perishable things, since I'm doing so many like stew type things, just the nature of what I'm cooking, the nature of what ingredients tend to be cheap. Vegetables aren't really cheap. You know, a lot of people like to think that they're cheap, but if you consider the price per calorie, they're actually quite expensive, because, you know, that box of spinach that I got frozen was about $1 and it only has 100 calories. So I could get so much more value out of that giant 10-pound bag of potatoes, which was just under $2, but so many more calories than 100 calories. And by the way, potatoes are not a vegetable, they're a starch. Anyway, it was just special having a nice green vegetable like spinach, something very bright in this meal plan when everything else was just kind of mushy and like bland. I don't know, for lack of a better word. It wasn't bland. Like the chili was totally flavorful. The curried lentils the week before were totally flavorful, but it was just special having this brighter, zingier flavor going on, especially that freshness from the garlic. So yeah, that's why the spinach pesto pasta is my MVP meal of the week. So what am I gonna make next week? Tune in next week to find out for week number 4, the grand finale. Bye.